As the 2012 presidential race draws to a close, Mitt Romney and Barack Obama are running neck and neck. Could the outcome of this election be decided by voter fraud? Joining me now to discuss this possibility is PJ Media contributor and former U.S. Department of Justice lawyer who served in the voting rights section, J. Christian Adams. Christian, thanks so much for being with us today.
Great to be here, Alex.
Now, you've argued that the 2012 election, this was probably going to be the biggest year for voter fraud and for the voter fraud deniers out there. What evidence do you have in that case?
Well, look, the story of the last couple of weeks is not just about Barack Obama's collapse at the first debate. It's about a war going on between these organized civil rights groups like the NAACP, the ACLU, versus Tea Party-oriented citizens groups who have promised to monitor the polls for the first time in a way that nobody ever has. And what you have seen come out of that is a vitriolic, nasty fight between the forces of the left and the forces of the Tea Party about election integrity. They have made threats. They've had members of Congress threaten private citizens. They've had unions threaten private citizens. They know that having people in the polls watching what's going on is an existential threat to their power.
Now, Christian, we'll talk about the Tea Party stuff in a minute, but on Election Day, the U.S. Department of Justice will deploy about 780 federal observers and department personnel to 51 jurisdictions in 23 states. Now, you were kind of the key figure in the Justice Department in bringing to light kind of the scandal of this new Black Panther Party voter intimidation that happened in 2008. We can see the footage right there of the two men outside of Philadelphia. Now, do you think that the presence of DOJ personnel is actually going to deter incidents of voter intimidation, or what do you think about what the DOJ is doing?
Well, they're not there for voter intimidation. Make no mistake about it. The list just came out on Friday. I've looked at the list. A couple things stand out. Number one, this is a smaller presence than the Bush administration deployed in 2004 and 2008. I think there's only just over 700 observers, which is down from previous years. Secondly, most of the places they're going to are old news. They're places where there were cases brought 7, 8 years ago. There's nothing newsworthy in this list. But third, there is something newsworthy in this list. They seem to be targeting Florida. They seem to be targeting Pennsylvania. They're going to South Carolina. They're going to Texas. But if you look at Pennsylvania and Florida, they're targeting states that have enacted voter integrity measures, voter ID in Pennsylvania, citizenship verification in Florida. And people at the Justice Department do not like these laws. And they're going to Lehigh County, Allentown, Pennsylvania, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, places the Justice Department has not set foot in a very long time.
Now, as you said, a lot of the states they're going to are states that have passed these voter ID laws. Now, can you give us a quick overview, of how do you think that these laws are going to play into the election, if the outcome is not what the Democrats want to see?
If you listen to the left, you are convinced that voter ID is a big conspiracy concocted by racist Republicans, and it will scare the devil out of minority voters who fear going to the polls. Sometimes these prophecies are self-fulfilling. It's been amazing to me that the left has pushed this narrative because they're scaring their own voters. But there's a bigger picture here. And if Romney wins, you can almost guarantee that there are going to be crazy, wacky, loony conspiracy theories out of the Advancement Project, the NAACP, the ACLU, and their Looney Tunes followers in the left-wing blogosphere like MoveOn.org that say that Romney won because of these voter ID laws. This is what they're cooking up, so it won't be a surprise when the dish is served.
Yeah, I know, and you see those reports from I think it's the Brennan Center that's actually also funded by MoveOn. If you look at some of the studies, though, states like Indiana, I think Mississippi and Georgia, you saw that ID laws didn't really have an effect on turnout in 2008 anyway. But you brought up the Tea Party, and I want to talk about this because we have Catherine Engelbrecht, her group True the Vote down in Houston. They're going to be playing a role poll watching this election. Can you talk a little bit about the Tea Party and how active they've been in trying to actually get, be part of poll watching this year?
Well, this is the election story of 2012, as far as I'm concerned. For years, for decades, the left has owned the field of election administration. But Catherine Engelbrecht has formed True the Vote, and what they are doing is a privatized Justice Department. They're looking at voter rolls around the country, looking for problems with dead voters, duplicate voters, and they're bringing lawsuits against states that are not cleaning up their voter rolls. Lawsuits that Eric Holder should have brought, and as I've reported at PJ Media many times, they're ideologically opposed to. They're doing election monitoring on election day, just like the Justice Department does. So what True the Vote has done is taken advantage of laws like motor voter, like state laws allowing people to monitor, and they've created this monstrous organization that's going to be on the ground on election day, monitoring, recording information, not objecting to people voting, but simply standing watch in the polls. And that's what the left can't abide, because up until 2012, they have owned the battlefield, and it's not going to be the same this year.
Yeah, I wanted to ask about that because, it seems like some people aren't taking too kindly to their participation. You have election expert Doug Chapin. He's come out and said that, he thinks the biggest thing to watch next Tuesday is the impact of these citizen poll watchers, including but not limited to those affiliated with Houston-based True the Vote. If the poll watchers are legion, they are extremely aggressive and their lists are rife with errors. He says it's not an overstatement to suggest that chaos will result, especially given that some voters may not take too kindly to being challenged and being met with aggression. Now, Christian, we've kind of hit on this, but is there a cause for legitimate concern here, or is this sour grapes on part of the union people that have basically owned this domain for the last, God, how many decades have they done that?
Yeah, this is Doug Chapin doing what all his cohorts are doing. That's lying about what True the Vote does. There's no aggression. There's no chaos at the polls. It's little old ladies with clipboards, just like the Federal Observer Program. People like Doug Chapin, Representative Elijah Cummings, these folks are just petrified that the elites in the left and the unions and the civil rights groups masquerading as civil rights groups who are really Democratic partisans are no longer have a monopoly on what's going on election day. Most American citizens, they just went and voted and they went home. But in the meantime, they left behind an organized labor effort in the polling place. That's going to be met this year with Americans who are no longer passive.
Now, finally, Christian, the last thing I just want to talk about is election fraud. We've heard it doesn't exist, but the son of Congressman Bill Moran had to resign from his father's campaign after being caught on tape by Project Veritas for offering tips on how to cast fraudulent ballots. Now, this is Pat Moran talking to the undercover reporter.
So it's going to be with the new voter ID laws as well. Because we're going to have...
He's got a few in D.C. He's got some in Maryland as well.
And I imagine it'll be easy enough for him to get...
You and me.
Like utility bills or something like that. Because he'll need bills, so he'll need something with a name and their address on it.
He's telling me that they're going to be hesitant to enforce it. He's telling me it's a law, but there's law and then there's enforcement.
And there'll be a lot of voter protection. So if they just have, just need a utility bill or a bank statement obviously would be tough, but I think faking a utility bill would be easy enough.
Now, Christian, can we expect to be hearing stories like this coming out after Election Day?
Well, yes, and listen. Democrats are so opposed to talking about voter fraud because let's name some Democrats who are engaged in it. Wendy Rosen, a Democrat congressional candidate in Maryland, voted in 2 states, which is a violation of federal criminal law. Where's Eric Holder on Wendy Rosen? Silence. How about Lesadala Sowers, the NAACP representative from Tunica, Mississippi, who voted 10 phony absentee ballots? No wonder the Democrat Party and the NAACP is so opposed to talking about voter fraud.
Now, Christian, before we go, do you have any tips for our viewers on what to watch for when they head out to the polls themselves? What do people need to know?
Well, listen, first of all, I encourage people to work at the polls. If you're sitting at home on election day not using vacation that you have, you're not doing your job. You need to call your county registrar, see if you can still sign up to work. If you can't sign up to work, volunteer with your local party, whoever they are, or a local candidate to monitor the polls. You cannot be home this election. This is not a spectator sport. But if you're just going in to vote, watch out for aggressive assistance. Watch out for people who are forcing people to vote a certain way. Look for irregularities such as the machine didn't work right. Be very careful if you're using touchscreens to check that summary page at the end to make sure that your vote was cast the way you wanted.
Well, Christian, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Alexis.
You can find J. Christian Adams online by visiting him at pjmedia.com. For PJTV, I'm Alexis Garcia.